Welcome to the Learn English Anytime channel, where learning English is easy and fun. Let's go to podcast. Hi Maria, how's your English learning going?
Hi, Jake. Honestly, it's been challenging. There's so much to learn. Grammar, vocabulary, speaking, and listening. I don't know where to focus.
That's completely normal. English is a big language, but the key is to take it step by step. What do you struggle with the most?
Definitely speaking. I understand a lot when I read or listen, but when I try to speak, I freeze.
That's very common. Speaking can feel intimidating at first, but it's just like any other skill. You get better with practice. Do you practice speaking regularly?
Not really. I'm afraid of making mistakes, and I don't have anyone to talk to.
Don't be afraid of mistakes. They're part of learning. Even native speakers make mistakes. You could try joining a language exchange group or using apps like HelloTalk or Tandem to find language partners.
I've heard of those apps. Do they actually work?
Absolutely. They connect you with people who are learning your native language so you can teach each other. It's a win-win.
That sounds interesting. But what if I can't think of what to say during a conversation?
Prepare some topics beforehand. For example, talk about your hobbies, daily routines, or a recent movie you watched. Start with simple sentences and build your confidence over time.
Okay, I'll try that. What about listening? I can't always understand when people speak fast.
Listening can be tricky, but there are ways to improve. Start with slower materials like podcasts or audiobooks for English learners. Then gradually move on to TV shows and movies.
Do you have any specific recommendations?
Sure. For beginners, try listening to podcasts like ESL Pod or The English We Speak from the BBC. For TV shows, Friends is a classic because the dialogue is simple and funny.
I've watched Friends with subtitles before, but sometimes I just read the subtitles instead of listening.
That's okay to start with, but eventually try to listen without subtitles. Or use subtitles in English to match the sounds with the words. It's a great way to train your ears.
I see. What about vocabulary? There are so many words and I forget them quickly.
Focus on learning the most common words first. Apps like Anki or Quizlet can help with spaced repetition. And don't just memorize words. Use them in sentences or conversations.
Should I keep a vocabulary notebook?
Definitely. Write down new words, their meanings, and example sentences. Review your notebook regularly and try to use the words in real-life situations.
That's a good idea. Now, grammar. It's so confusing.
Grammar can feel overwhelming, but you don't need to master all the rules at once. Start with the basics, like verb tenses and sentence structure. As you read and listen more, you'll pick up patterns naturally.
So, I shouldn't worry about perfect grammar when I speak?
Exactly. Focus on communicating your ideas. People will understand you even if your grammar isn't perfect. You can polish it later.
That's a relief. What about writing? Is it as important as speaking?
Writing is a great way to organize your thoughts and practice grammar. Start small. Write short diary entries or messages. Over time, you can try longer pieces like emails or essays.
Who will check my writing, though?
You can use tools like Grammarly or ask a teacher or language partner to review your work. Online communities like Reddit's English Learning subreddit are also helpful.
I didn't think of that. What about pronunciation? Sometimes I feel like I'm saying words wrong.
Pronunciation is important, but don't stress too much. Listen carefully to native speakers and mimic them. Use apps like ELSA Speak to practice pronunciation. Tongue twisters are fun, too.
Can you give me a tongue twister?
Sure, try this. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Laughs. That's hard.
It gets easier with practice. Tongue twisters are great for improving clarity and confidence.
Thanks, Jake. Do you have any tips for staying motivated?
Motivation comes from progress. Set small, achievable goals like learning 5 new words a day or watching 1 English video a week. Celebrate your achievements, no matter how small.
What if I feel like I'm not improving?
You are improving. You just might not notice it. Keep track of your progress. Compare your current skills with where you started, and you'll see how far you've come.
That's a good idea. I'll start keeping a progress journal.
Great. And remember, learning English is a journey. Enjoy the process and don't be afraid to make mistakes. You're doing great, Maria.
Thanks, Jake. I feel more confident now. I'm excited to try all these tips.
That's the spirit. Keep practicing and you'll see amazing results.
Thanks, Jake. These tips are really helpful, but sometimes I feel bored or stuck with traditional methods. How can I make learning English more fun?
Great question. Learning doesn't have to be boring. You can incorporate activities you already enjoy into your practice. Do you like music, games, or something else?
I love music and movies.
Perfect. Start with English songs you enjoy. Listen to the lyrics, sing along, and try to understand the meaning. Apps like Music's Match can show you synchronized lyrics.
I do that sometimes. But what about movies?
Watch movies or series you love in English. If they feel too difficult, start with animated movies or shows because they often use simpler language. Turn on English subtitles to help you follow along.
That's a good idea. What about games?
Games are fantastic for language learning. Try word games like Scrabble or crosswords. If you enjoy video games, choose ones with lots of dialogue in English. Many games let you interact with characters and even hear different accents.
Oh, I didn't think of that. What about social media?
Social media is a goldmine. Follow English-speaking influencers, watch short videos on TikTok or Instagram, and join language learning groups on Facebook or Reddit. Interact with people by commenting or sharing your thoughts.
Won't people judge my mistakes online?
Most people are supportive, especially in learning communities. Mistakes show you're trying, and that's what matters. Plus, you'll get real-life practice.
True. I'll give it a shot. How can I improve my thinking in English?
A fantastic way is to narrate your day in English. For example, if you're making breakfast, think, "I'm boiling water for tea." It gets your brain used to forming sentences in English.
That sounds like a fun challenge. What about practicing with a native speaker?
That's one of the best ways to improve. If you can't meet someone in person, use apps like italki or Preply to connect with tutors. You can also make friends through language exchange platforms.
I'll try that. Any advice for learning phrasal verbs? They confuse me so much.
Phrasal verbs can be tricky because their meanings aren't always obvious. Start with the most common ones like get up, look after, or turn off. Practice them in context. For example, write a story or sentences using them.
That makes sense. Can I also improve my grammar through stories?
Absolutely. When you read stories, you see grammar in action. Pay attention to sentence structures and tenses. Try retelling the story in your own words. It helps with both grammar and speaking.
Speaking of stories, is it okay to read children's books?
Yes, children's books are excellent for beginners. They use simple language and often repeat words, which helps you remember them. Plus, they're fun to read.
What about books for adults?
Start with graded readers, books specifically designed for language learners. Once you're comfortable, you can move on to novels or short stories you find interesting.
Thanks, Jake. I've noticed that sometimes my motivation drops. How do I stay consistent?
Motivation can come and go, but consistency is key. Create a routine, like studying for 20 minutes every day, and stick to it. Mix things up to keep it interesting.
How do you mean?
Don't do the same thing every day. One day practice speaking, the next focus on reading or writing. Use games, watch videos, or listen to podcasts to keep it fresh.
That makes sense. How can I reward myself for progress?
Set small goals, like learning 10 new words or completing a chapter of a book. When you achieve them, reward yourself with something you enjoy, a treat, a break, or a favorite activity.
That's a good idea. Jake, do you think I can ever become fluent?
Absolutely, Maria. Fluency takes time and effort, but it's possible. Just focus on improving a little each day. Remember, even native speakers are always learning.
That's encouraging. Thanks for all your advice, Jake. I feel much more confident about my English learning journey now.
You're welcome, Maria. Keep practicing and don't hesitate to ask for help. You're doing great.